Hello, everyone. My cat has joined us again. You can see his tail here. Actually, he's not interested in philosophy at all. He's just hungry. So, today's task is to talk about the essay assignment. And I like to do this because I realize that while many of you have probably written an essay or two in your time in secondary school, Um, the way that we do essays in university, particularly in a philosophy class, is a little bit different than the way you might write, I don't know, say a high school English paper. So I like to give instructions. I don't like for students to just kind of go into this blind. Um, so today I'm going to start by talking about how to think about approaching your paper, when your paper is due, how to avoid plagiarism, and how to construct an argument. And then we'll come up with some topics. I have a few rattling around in my head that I'll share with you at the end of toward the end of the lecture. But I'm hoping some of you will suggest some cool ideas as well. And after that, I'll probably put them into a list and make that list available on Brightspace. So you've got to write an essay. And in thinking about your essay, this is generally the set of instructions I give to students in all of my classes. It's very important for you to identify an area of interest that is related to what we're learning about in this class. So remember, this is a philosophy class where we're focusing on epistemology, metaphysics, and mind. So really, you could pick anything related to that. That's your area of interest. And I recommend one thing that you can do for yourself is to write all of this down on a little piece of paper, um, print it out, or if you've handwritten it, just take the paper, printed, handwritten, whatever, and stick it up somewhere where you're working on your essay proper. And that way you always kind of have it there as a reference, right? So write down your area of interest, describe it for yourself. What is my area of interest? Maybe you want to write a paper on um I don't know, one of the arguments that we've looked at so far. You might want to write about Descartes' skepticism, for example, whether some aspect of that is I don't know, perhaps too skeptical or not skeptical enough, right? So you would describe that for yourself. And then what you want to do is identify a research question or a thesis statement. Here I've got something that's tangentially related to the class. I've asked a research question: can a machine, like a computer or a robot, have a soul? That's an example of one of the interesting research questions you could ask. The reason I put this here is because this is kind of related to my own research interests, so it's an easy example for me, right? And it's related to the class because it deals with a question um, that's kind of related to what we will talk about when we get to the nature of the mind. That is, what is the nature of the soul? And we're also thinking about um, artificial cognitive systems, um, which we don't get to talk about too much in this class, but which are a very sort of very hot topic right now, in this sort of uh, age of AI that we find ourselves in. Um, so your research question helps you frame your paper. But you don't have to go with a research question. You can also just articulate a thesis statement. And again, I'll say a little bit more about what a thesis statement is in a moment. But a thesis statement in a nutshell tells your reader in one or two sentences what exactly you are going to argue. So you might say, in this paper, I will argue that machines cannot have a soul, cannot be said to have a soul. Or you could argue that they could. People have actually argued this. If you want to think of it this way, your research question sets you up, and then your thesis is like your answer to your research question. And you want to make sure you tell the reader both of those things right away. You know, the end of the first paragraph usually is where it appears. You also want to put together a little plan of attack. What evidence do you think you'll use, and how will you use it? Will you use chapters from the textbook? What other books might you seek out? Will you use papers, journal articles, etc., right? Try and identify a list of sources that you can use. And try and also sketch your argument out. You know, you can sort of schematize your paper where before you go and write the whole thing, you can sketch it out like paragraph 1 will be my introduction. Paragraph 2, I will introduce some important terms. Paragraph 3, I'll start arguing, etc., right? April, go ahead.
Is there a certain number of like scholarly sources that we're supposed to have in the paper?
Yeah, I don't really have a hard and fast rule for this, but I think that somewhere around 5 is probably appropriate. Uh,
Okay.
you can use the textbook and my lectures, of course, but you shouldn't rely solely on those.
No,
Um,
like outside sources.
yeah, outside sources. And for the purposes of this paper, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is also an acceptable source.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so just in case people are wondering, people often ask if they can cite encyclopedias and dictionaries. The general rule of thumb is no. Um, but you can cite the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And I'll explain that. I'll explain why in a moment. Um, yeah, so Kai is asking, would it be wise to communicate our thesis with me before diving into writing? Yes. If you are unsure about whether you've identified a suitable thesis, then you can email me and I will let you know what I think. For citations, well, I'll get to this in a moment, but the short answer is I don't care. Uh, but I do recommend APA. Um, just be consistent. Don't switch between styles, right? Yeah, you can use the textbook. That would be one of the 5 sources. So when is it going to be due? Well, it's due. Oh, this is actually wrong. Whoops. I've gone and given you the wrong information here. So we're just going to skip that. We're just going to skip that slide. Oh, I knew I should have double checked that. No, the due date is here in the course outline. So let's open that up. November 22nd. That's when it's due. So I'll have to re-upload the slides with the correct information. So this is wrong. It's due November 22nd, which is why we're doing this now. However, this other information is correct. Um, your essay should be between 12 and 1500 words in length, and this total length does not include your title page if you have one or your references section. Keep in mind this is worth, a good chunk of your grade, 30%, and I will penalize you 10% per day if it's late. Um, unless you communicate your extenuating circumstances to me. So if you're ill and you haven't been able to finish your essay, that's fine, but you need to let me know. and you need to provide me with a medical self-declaration form, which you can easily fill out. It's like so that you don't need a doctor's note. Um, you can simply fill this form out. I had the flu, or it could be a mental health thing, right? Maybe a bout of depression or anxiety, right? If it physical or mental health, you need a medical self-declaration form. Um, or if some other emergency happens, right? Car accident, computer's broken, um, anything like that. Just reach out to me and let me know what's going on. If I don't hear from you, I will penalize you. So, what format should you aim for? Well, the defaults on Microsoft Word are probably fine, and those are usually 10 or 11 point font size. I do ask that you double space your work, because even though I'm not reading paper copies, it still is easier to read everything if it's double spaced. Because my TAs and I we're going to be reading a lot of papers, so a little eye strain happens when we're staring at the screen. So double spacing makes it easier for us. You should submit in Word format, so docx, and failing that, submit it in as a PDF file. I can't open other files. So docx, PDF, those are acceptable. Other files are not. Don't worry about this proposal aspect, but the final essay, of course, needs a bibliography. And again, APA format is preferred, and in the helpful materials module, you'll find a link to Purdue University's online writing lab, which contains a citation guide for that style. You can use a different style. I don't really care. I just ask that you use the style that you pick consistently. And you definitely have to make sure you cite all work properly because you want to avoid plagiarism. So these are just some of the things that count as plagiarism. If you reproduce or paraphrase portions of someone else's work, whether it's published or unpublished, and you present that as your own, that's plagiarism. I don't think we have to worry too much about the second one, but you definitely can't submit anything in whole or in part and written by somebody else. Oh, actually, no, we do have to worry about this one. It's this bottom one we don't have to worry about. You're probably not going to hand in the same piece of work from another class in this class. Um, but if you were to do so without my permission, that would be plagiarism. But yeah, you don't want to submit an assignment written in whole or in part by someone else. And that includes AI, of course. I mean, I've had papers in the past that were just pulled from online repositories, and someone puts their name on it, submits it as their work. That is incredibly easy to catch. And generative AI is also somewhat easy to catch. We don't use AI detectors, but there are things that let us know when a paper is likely generated by AI. So that counts as submitting work that's not written by yourself. And if we catch you, that would be plagiarism, certainly. Well, I'll get to that question in a moment, Philippe. The short answer is no. Um, but there are exceptions, so I'll explain in a moment. Um, for paraphrasing, can we still paraphrase if we include an in-text citation? Yeah, paraphrasing is important because it shows me that you can explain someone else's idea in your own words. You just have to let me know which ideas are yours and which are not. That's the key here for avoiding plagiarism. You need to let me know whose ideas belong to someone else and whose are yours, right? So if you're going to paraphrase somebody, say you're paraphrasing a part of the textbook, You can just say, as Crumley says, and then cite Crumley and cite the page number, but put it in your own words. That's fine. No, Shania. I understand the difference between an accidental miscitation, like that's just improper citation. Like if I put things in quotation marks and I forget to put my in-text citation, well, it's already pretty clear from the quotation marks that you're quoting somebody. And it might even be clear who you're quoting. You just haven't cited it right. And that's different than taking someone else's idea and presenting it as your own. So that might affect your mark, but I'm not going to prosecute you for plagiarism. I might dock a couple marks for improper citation, but I'm not going to send your paper to the plagiarism police or whatever, right? Um, yeah, so that's brings me to the next point. Always use appropriate acknowledgement. So when in doubt, cite, right? Using another's data or research findings, probably don't have to worry about that in this class. Failing to acknowledge sources through the use of proper citations. Again, this is usually accidental. Um, so obviously, if there's a couple spots where you failed to cite properly, but it's apparent that you're not actively trying to take an idea and present it as your own, that's I'm not going to count that as plagiarism. But for cases where um and I've had this happen before as well, where I've had students submit essays that are like just collections of different paragraphs that are copied and pasted directly from other papers and not cited. That's plagiarism, and that will be prosecuted accordingly. If you submit a paper written by someone else or written by AI, that's plagiarism. And I can't deal with this on my own. When I get a case of suspected academic misconduct, because plagiarism is really like the cardinal sin of academia, right? It's a type of academic misconduct where I have to report it to the chair of the department as well as the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. Um, and then they decide the penalty. So I can't just deal with it on my own. And the consequences can be quite severe. I mean, anything from failing the assignment to failing the class. And for repeat offenders, potentially getting kicked out of your degree program. So don't do it. It's not worth it. It also goes on your on your transcript. So if you got an academic misconduct report, that goes on your transcript. That follows you around, for your entire time at university. Maybe you've decided one day you want to apply for a scholarship. Well, good luck if you have an academic misconduct report on your transcript. So just don't do it. It is not worth it. Um, no, David, that wouldn't count as plagiarism, but I still wouldn't recommend you do this. Um, After all, Carleton has a writing services department where you can seek the advice of a human. Um, just because you never know, you might say, "Hey, ChatGPT, can you rewrite this paragraph?" And ChatGPT might accidentally plagiarize something, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's right, April. You can drop into writing services. Just don't, because then all of a sudden your paper sounds like it's written by AI. So, and it's easy to tell. Like I've done this long enough. I know ChatGTP is still kind of a new thing, but I've marked enough papers that I just kind of know. Um, so don't do it. Just I wouldn't recommend that. Don't use AI. Get help from a human being. The one instance where I think I might let you use AI is coming up with hello, sir, is coming up with maybe a topic. So you could say to ChatGTP, hey, can you give me 5 ideas for my philosophy essay? Like 5 research questions. That's okay. But if you do that, I want you to acknowledge that you've done that. I want you to say, I used ChatGPT to help come up with this research question, right? Yeah, that's a good point, Kaya. Sometimes AI can ruin what you're actually trying to say, like mess up your argument. Um, yeah, writing services for all that. They have drop-in people and you go in and they help you. Yeah, and it's in the library. So you just bring your paper, you bring what you have, and you say, "Hey, I need a second pair of eyes on this," and someone will sit down and go through the paper with you and tell you about what you can improve, etc. Um, Remy says, "What happens in the circumstances where where what I thought was an original idea was actually explored by someone else, but I had not found discovered their paper or article? Is this still plagiarism?" No. Because you're not stealing, you know, you've come up with an idea that's perhaps similar to someone else, and that's great. Um, uh, if you really didn't know that that work existed, then it's not plagiarism because you didn't read it. Um, so don't worry about that. And you know what? This is a first year class. It's likely that a lot of you will, I don't know, make speculations or draw conclusions or make claims in your paper that have been made before, right? I remember when I was 14 thinking about the big questions, and I came up with a philosophical thought experiment. I thought I was so original. I was thinking about how you could know or not know whether there exists a God. Um, and I was thinking about claims of God's existence. And I thought to myself, well, I could simply claim that there is a an invisible pink elephant at the center of the galaxy. Um, and I could make all kinds of claims about this, but I could never know with certainty anything about this element or this elephant. And I thought, oh, we look at me, I'm so smart and original. But this is really just Russell's teapot. Um, it's Carl Sagan's Dragon in Your Garage, right? There are many, many variants of this thought experiment. Um, I came up with my own variant of it, but the idea was certainly not new. So if you do something like that, that's fine. It's not plagiarism. I actually think it's good that you're thinking and being creative, right? Um, yeah, writing services, well, they help you with anything and everything to do with writing your paper. So if you've got a question about your essay, they'll be able to answer it, at least when it comes to the writing and the researching. Grammarly, again, be careful. Um, there's not really one essay prompt. You're going to come up with a topic for your essay. Paraphrasing tools, again, like be careful with AI. You don't want your paper to sound like it was written by a machine because that will raise suspicion. Write your paper, get a human being to help you. Because if you're going to stick with this, right, if you're going to stick with your studies, whether it's in philosophy or some other program, you need to learn how to write. Um, there's no use in having a machine do it for you. Like it's a skill that you need to have to succeed in university, in the humanities or in the social sciences and in the sciences. So you need to write. You need to know how to write. Um, as I said, I recommend you use APA style for your citations. You can use whatever style you want, but I just ask that you are consistent and use this. This is the online writing lab at Purdue University, where they have all kinds of citation guides. I believe I've linked the APA guide on Brightspace. So if you go to the helpful materials module, you'll find a link to that particular citation guide. Um, what's the meaning of life? Well, it's an interesting question, but it's a bit broad. I mean, you've only got 12 to 1500 words, right? So you're not going to answer that question in 12 to 1500 words. I'll just say that. Um, you want to narrow things down a bit, and I'll explain how to do that. Yeah, that's right. OWL is very helpful. Um, yeah, around 5 pages. Nope, do not use ChatGTP to make citations. Why? Because ChatGPT can make them up. And that's one of the giveaways that you've used AI. So, like I said, do not use ChatGPT. The one circumstance during which it might be all right is to come up with like a topic, or to help you come up with a topic, but do not use it for editing. Do not use it for generating citations. It's not to be used. Yeah. Even Purdue's OWL has a citation generator. Ben, that's still a bit broad. I'll get to choosing your topic in a moment, but um yeah, Amy, that's right. Yeah, it really depends, Tyler. Some citation generators are pretty good. Um, some are not. It's better just to do them yourself. Or, and I highly recommend this. There's a plugin you can get from Microsoft Word called Zotero or Zotaro, something like that. And what you do is you take the PDF copies of all your sources. So, I don't know, copies of book chapters and papers, and you put them all in your essay file in a little file folder that you make that Zotero has access to. And then Zotero generates the citation for you. Yeah, so use a citation machine, but make sure you use a good one. Okay, like Amy says, I really want to get to this point. Yes, we are overestimating the powers of AI. Here's the real reason you don't want to use AI, besides the fact that it's plagiarism. ChatGPT and other programs like it don't know anything, okay? Who knows how ChatGPT works? Who can tell me the nature of ChatGPT? What is it? A computer program? A symbol system? A neural network? What is it? Yeah, you're all right. You're all correct. It is a really, really, really big neural network. It's not supervised now, but I believe it does use supervised learning. Um, it's called a large language model, and yeah, basically you're all getting the right answer, right? It's trained on a massive amount of data, of linguistic data. Um, well, Jeffrey Hinton would be well aware of the limits of something like ChatGPT. Jeffrey Hinton, he's the co-winner of the Nobel Prize. Taught at U of T for a long time, and he's the man who invented or co-created convolutional neural networks. Um, so ChatGPT doesn't know anything. Why? Well, we can get into the reasons. this might actually make a really good essay topic for you. Is AI actually intelligent? But ChatGPT, like a lot of you were saying, is just trained on a massive, massive amount of data. And then based upon the prompt that you give it, it works out what word is most likely to come next in the sentence it's generating. So it's not employing, like when I'm speaking now to you, I'm actually employing ideas, concepts, etc. I'm actually thinking, I'm actually reasoning. ChatGPT is not. It's just a big giant network that spits out the next most likely word in the sentence based on what it's been trained on and the prompt you give it. And it can be kind of uncanny to give it a prompt and see it put a response together, but you got to remember it is a dumb mechanical process, not an original um, employment of reason as a universal instrument. I don't think so. I could be wrong about that, Cormac, but it's certainly not sentient. Um, yeah. Yeah, ChatGPT might be good for computer code. It is not good for philosophy. Like I asked it once about me. I was like, "Tell me about Professor Josh Redstone." Oh, Professor Josh Redstone teaches at the University of California, Berkeley. And I was like, "Wow, I wish." That'd be sick. But no, unfortunately not. I mean, not unfortunately. I love teaching at Carleton. But ChatGPT just made that up. I'll put it to you another way. Have you ever seen the AI generated videos? They go viral from time to time, and it looks like the AI is literally hallucinating or dreaming. Like I saw one with Gordon Ramsay, and he's chopping lettuce and there's just like infinite lettuce coming out of where he's chopping the lettuce, right? Oh yeah, Will Smith eating spaghetti. Okay, so that's what ChatGPT is doing with words. So do you really want a paper that's the equivalent of, Gordon Ramsay chopping infinite lettuce? No, you don't. Yeah, that's true, Joey. And right now, the New York Times is actually engaged in a lawsuit with ChatGPT, which alleges that with OpenAI, the company that's produced ChatGPT, and this lawsuit alleges that a lot of like in certain responses it gives, it is actually just copying almost word for word from New York Times articles. So it's not even generating anything that original a lot of the time. It is like you say, just working like a search engine. Yeah, no, it's better for coding, Shania. Like I have a friend who works in cybersecurity and he uses it as an assistant. Generative AI is really supposed to be used as an assistant, I think. Ultimately, when this technology gets better, it's going to be kind of like the computer on the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek, right? You can talk to the computer, and the computer can help you solve a problem. Like, I remember one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where, I don't know, Geordi and Data, the chief engineer and the robot commander, the android Data, my favorite character. They're trying to solve some problem and they need to work out why something malfunctioned, and it's because there's some kind of residue on the thing and they need to narrow down how it got there, and they're talking to the computer like, okay, what could have caused this? Oh, these four things. Okay, computer, out of those four things, how many are on the ship? Oh, these two things. Oh, and where do we find these two things on the ship? Blah, blah, blah. So they're interactively working through a problem with the computer. That's ultimately what this is kind of for. It's not the kind of thing you want to use to write an essay, though. Yeah. Yeah, that's true, Joey. Yeah, Tyler, let's read this. So Dr. Josh Redstone is a philosopher in cognitive science. Do. Yep. Yep. Yep, that's correct. This phrase, the intersection of philosophy of mind, cognitive science, and artificial intelligence and robotics is pretty much just straight up plagiarized from my biography. So there's ChatGPT being a search engine. That's plagiarized from my biography that I use for talks that I give, etc. Oh, Brady. Oh, I don't exist. Well, interesting. Uh, Consciousness, emotions, belief in pseudoscience. Yeah, a lot of this is really just pulled from my bio. This is wrong. The last sentence is actually wrong. Um, Science, pseudoscience, and the paranormal is not a public outreach activity. It was an enrichment mini course that I taught a couple of years ago to high school students. So there you go. A lot of this is just ripped from my bio, and some of it is wrong. Um, yeah, yeah, Sarah, good. That's good. And I'll get to the similar idea when it comes to using Wikipedia. Um, okay, so bottom line, don't use generative AI. It's not good. The best case scenario is that you'll get maybe a B, which is okay. But that's just okay. You want to do better than okay. Worst case scenario, it's plagiarism. So don't do it. It's not worth it. And the more you learn about how ChatGPT actually works, the more you're like, the more you're going to say to yourself, "Oh, I really don't want this to write my essay." Right? What kind of paper could you write? Well, you're going to have whatever kind of paper you write, some survey. So you're going to have to outline some ideas, some field of philosophy. Your entire paper won't be a survey paper. It won't just be literature review, but you will have to review some ideas to show me how you understand them. So let's say you want to write, I don't know, maybe you want to write a paper like that asks, is artificial intelligence truly intelligent? You might have to survey some ideas like what AI is, um, and some arguments um, that say it is intelligent versus it's not. So maybe you outline the definition of AI from, I don't know, the Stanford Encyclopedia, and then you tell me a little bit about Alan Turing on computing machines to say yes, they are intelligent. Then you tell me a little bit about John Searle's Chinese room thought experiment to review an argument that says they're not intelligent. Then you decide between those two, right? So you're not just going to be writing a survey paper. You're going to need to write something with an argument. You can have a positive argument where, as the name suggests, you're arguing for a particular position, or a negative argument where you argue against a position. Or in the example I described a moment ago, you can have an adjudicative paper where you adjudicate between two positions. So, is artificial intelligence truly intelligent? Well, you could begin by defining what AI is, and then you could look at something like Alan Turing's Turing test, which says that a machine is intelligent if it can hold a conversation with us. And then you might look at John Searle's Chinese Room, which says that here's an example of something having a conversation with no understanding of what it's doing, kind of like ChatGPT. You wouldn't say that's intelligent, would you? Right? So you lay those two out, and then you tell me with reason, using reasons and sound argument, which position you think is correct. And that would be an adjudicative paper. I won't spend much time on this slide, but I just want to emphasize that there shall be no 5 paragraph essays. The 5 paragraph essay is something you're no doubt all familiar with. But that's because it's really just a teaching tool, right? It's not how you actually write an essay. So Use as many paragraphs as you need to within that 12 to 1500 word limit. Um, you do need an introduction and a concluding paragraph, but don't limit yourself to three body paragraphs. You're going to need a lot more than that. Um, and you're going to want to think as each paragraph as a step in your argument, a step toward your conclusion, if you like. So no 5 paragraph essays. And remember, you want to present an argument. Like the reason we write an essay is to try and convince somebody of something. That's what an essay means. Essay comes from the French, which means attempt, right? So it's an attempt to convince the reader of your thesis. So you need to pick a thesis. What are you going to argue? And you need to put that in a thesis statement, a single sentence which conveys your thesis. And you're going to argue for it. You're going to try and convince the reader of the truth of your thesis using sound reasoning and good evidence. So, it is very important, and this is probably the biggest mistake I see in papers at this level, is that they just don't have a well-articulated thesis statement. You need to make sure that by the time the reader gets to the end of the first paragraph, that the reader knows exactly what you are going to try to convince them of. I suppose you could take a controversial position, but if there is evidence for your position, I mean, good evidence, it shouldn't be controversial. What can you give me an example of what you're thinking of, Jonathan? Like, you don't want to be saying something that's flat out wrong, is the thing. So, but if you can give me an example, I can tell you. Yeah, AI, I mean, that's controversial, I guess, but you're not going to really find any serious scholars making this argument, is the problem. Yeah, Cormac, that's right. Like, if you wanted to adjudicate between, say, and we haven't got to this stuff yet, but we probably will. We will a little bit later on. Um, if you wanted to adjudicate between like John Searle and Alan Turing on artificial intelligence, you would say in your introduction, like in this paper, I'm going to adjudicate between the position represented by Alan Turing and John Searle. And I'm going to argue after surveying each of their arguments for and against AI. I will argue that either, Turing or Searle is correct. And you'll give reasons why you think that, right? What you really want to do is avoid anything really wacky, right? Like I know I pick on the flat earthers a lot, but I don't want to see any flat earth stuff. Not that I think you're going to write any flat earth stuff, but I don't want to see any weird like conspiracy theory stuff. I don't want to see like vaccines don't work, flat earth, we never went to the moon, Trump won. I don't want to see any of that. Yeah, existence of Bigfoot. I do have a class where you can talk about that, but it's not this one. Um, so for example, like I was teaching a philosophy of technology class, and I had a paper delivered in that class, which was wild. Um, this paper argued about the ineffectiveness of the vaccine mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic, which I mean, you could make constructive criticisms of that certainly, but this paper was just a weird sort of Facebook uncle rant. Um, if you read Facebook, at one point in the paper, it was claimed if you simply go on Facebook, you can see so many memes that are evidence of the tyranny of Justin Trudeau. Um, and I thought, okay, like there are legitimate criticisms you could make of the government, and then there's this, which is just wacky, right? He didn't even cite the memes. He just gestured toward the memes. He didn't even tell me which memes he's talking about, right? So do not write a paper like that. It should be related to the themes of the class, right? So something to do with mind, metaphysics, or epistemology. Yeah, like Jeremiah, that would be a legitimate thing to talk about, right? But unfortunately, this student didn't do that. Um, so yeah, pick a thesis and build an argument. And remember, this is what you're sketching out in your plan of attack. So arguments consists of premises and conclusions. We've already seen examples of arguments, lots of arguments. Um, and if the premises are true and you don't commit any errors of reasoning, then the conclusion will follow from your premises. Well, that's not. I mean, when I say you could write about that, I mean that would be a good alternative topic to the one my student delivered in a different class. But again, that was a different class. That was philosophy of technology. You want to write something on metaphysics, mind, or epistemology. Like it has to have something to do with this class. Um, so yeah, there are lists of logical fallacies that you can find on the internet that you'll want to avoid. I'm not going to go through too many of them here, but just make sure when you're building an argument that the premises are true and the conclusion follows from the premises. And we've seen lots of arguments, right? The dream argument, the demon argument, Hume's argument for why we can't rely on the uniformity principle. These are all arguments. So you see how arguments work, right? Arguments aren't like what you have in the like on Twitter or in the YouTube comment section or with your friends if you're having a disagreement. In this context, an argument again is an attempt to convince somebody of something, right? Yeah, Mariam. So, well, one example would be like, is artificial intelligence truly intelligent? Um, um, uh, yep. So, Raphael, would the existence of God work? Yes. You could write a paper on that. Absolutely. That would be a great topic. Um, your argument, so just to answer Sarah's question, your argument doesn't have to be deductive. Um, it probably will be. Um, but you might also use empirical evidence in your paper. This is something that philosophers have really warmed up to in the last few decades, making sure that philosophy is like empirically informed. So you could still include an empirical element. Um, but as far as topics go, yeah, like I will give you a list at the end of this. Um, yeah, Shania, that's a really good one. Is the mind a product of brain activity or does it exist independently? I mean, that's really related to like Descartes' substance dualism, right? Like, is the mind something physical? Like, is the mind just what the brain does? Or is it something non-physical, like a thinking substance or a soul? And when we get to the chapter on mind, like if you're thinking of writing on this, I would read that chapter ahead of time, but there's a lot when it comes to the mind, there's a lot you can do with it. Um, and I highly recommend that you frame all of this with a research question, right? So, like Shania just said, is the mind a product of brain activity or does it exist independently? That is a really good research question because then you can say right after, in this paper, I will argue that, and then you give me your thesis, right? We can skip this, but basically, without limiting yourself to 5 paragraphs, in the intro, introduce your topic, your area of interest, rough outline of your paper. Make sure you give me your thesis statement slash research question. The body is where the magic happens. Each paragraph is a step in your argument. And your conclusion is basically rewriting the introduction, but in the past tense. So instead of in this paper, I will, rewrite in this paper, I have, etc. Chloe doesn't really matter. Third person is fine. A lot of people think they sort of have this impression that they can't write in the first person, but you absolutely can. I think the avoiding the first person pronoun I is something that tends to happen in English studies. And most people learn to write an essay in high school English class. So, you kind of get this impression that you can't use the first person pronoun, but you absolutely can in philosophy. It's fine. Um, Speaking of the language of your paper, don't try and include a lot of jargon or make things more complicated than they need to be. To paraphrase Albert Einstein, keep it as simple as possible, but no simpler. Use the thesaurus and your dictionary to make sure that you're using terms correctly. Do not cite the dictionary as a source. Okay? Why? Dictionaries don't actually define words, they just record how they are used. So do not use a dictionary as a source. When I say use a dictionary, I mean use it to make sure that you're using words correctly. Don't use it as something that you cite. That's not what it's for. Um, could you have more than one thesis? Yeah, I suppose, but I don't recommend it. You're not going to have time to defend. You're not going to have the time or the space to defend two different arguments. So I would zero in on one very precise thesis. So yeah, first person pronoun is fine. Third person is okay. You can even use the royal we if you really want to sound fancy. So in this paper, we will argue that blah, 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 blah. That's fine. Watch out for improper punctuation. A lot of people at this stage in writing don't use semicolons correctly. So watch out for improper semicolon use. Watch out for comma splice. Excuse me. Watch out for comma splices. Watch out for run-on sentences, sentence fragments. All of the stuff that your grammar checker would catch. Watch out for that. Um, a few more do's and don'ts. I mean, write for an intelligent but uninformed person. Somebody who's smart, but assume the reader doesn't know anything about philosophy. Like, I know I'm the one reading it, and the TAs are reading it, and we know lots about philosophy. But assume that whoever's reading it knows nothing about philosophy. That will make sure that you have the opportunity to explain all the terms and concepts that you introduce, which shows us that you understand what you're doing. Um, Explain clearly, but don't dumb things down too much. Try and use inclusive language. Like don't use mankind, use humanity instead. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it, Kaya. Yeah, like imagine you're writing a paper for your parents and and you want them to know about philosophy and you're explaining it to somebody who's smart but who's never studied philosophy before. Yeah, so pretend it's like for your parents. Um Make sure you use technical terms correctly. Um Really avoid these sweeping overgeneralized statements like since the beginning of time or since the dawn of man. Like just don't. I don't want to see that. Make sure you use phrases and terms correctly, right? A big one is begs the question, right? Remember, we're in a philosophy class. Begging the question is a type of logical fallacy. It's a type of circular argument. So if something raises a question, you don't say it begs the question. You only say it begs the question when someone is begging the question, right? Like the Cartesian circle, or if we try and justify reliance on the uniformity principle via induction, we're begging the question. We're going in a circle. That's when you use that. Um, Probably don't need to worry too much about any more of this. Okay, so we should try and come up with some topics. So, as I said, um, anything to do with the class is good. And one thing you can do is take the textbook, look through the table of contents, look at what we've covered, but also what we have yet to cover. So, next time we're doing perception. After that, what do we have? We have universals and then particulars, then the nature of mind, personal identity, free will, and the nature of God, nature, and existence. So, um, there's been some interesting stuff so far, like Descartes' skepticism and Hume's skepticism. The nature of knowledge is pretty interesting, but I suspect you guys are going to want to talk about maybe even bigger questions besides what knowledge is and how we come to have it. So you can look through the rest of the book, and you might come up with some ideas, and we'll do that together now, right after I refill my coffee. Wow. All right, that's better. So, you know, let's take, for example, the next chapter we're going to cover, which is chapter 5 on perception. That chapter deals with um, how the world is represented to us. So you might ask a question like, do our senses represent the world the way it really is? I mean, this gets back to Descartes, right? Um, so you might adjudicate between two positions like direct realism, which says that there is a real, external, mind independent reality that we are in direct contact with, versus representative realism, which says that what I'm seeing right now, when I look at the book, when I hold the book and feel its weight in my hand, when I see the colors here and even smell the book, smells like paper. When I do this, what my mind is doing is merely building a representation of the book, a mental representation of the book. So you could adjudicate between direct realism and representative realism. For example, well, Shania, that would be a similar topic. That would kind of be like realism versus idealism, right? Like, remember, realism is the view that there is a mind independent reality that is physical. Um, but idealism says that the mental world is fundamental. So, really, everything is really just ideas, right? So, you could adjudicate between that, realism and idealism. Or going further into the book, um, the nature of mind, right? That's when you have questions such as, can a machine think? Am I a machine? Right? As the human being, is the human brain like a computer? Or is the soul real? Like, what is the nature of the mind? Is the mind just what the brain does? You could adjudicate between a couple different theories of mind, like, say, identity theory and functionalism, all of which are in chapter 8. Um, Amy asks about consciousness. Yes. Well, you could simply ask what consciousness is, and you could summarize a few arguments. You could summarize a couple of theories and then try and decide between them. although that is a big topic. But you could probably do it. Chloe, if you're adjudicating between positions, you don't want your conclusion to just be your opinion. And the reason that it shouldn't be, or the reason that it probably won't be if you do this properly, is that you're going to give the reader reasons for your position, right? You're not just going to describe two positions and say, I like this one more, right? You're going to give reasons why one is better than the other. And that takes it from mere opinion to argument. So as long as you give the reader those reasons, you should be okay. Um, yeah, do all mammals have souls? Like, do non-human animals have souls? That's a great question. Yeah, is our ability to reason well, yeah, of course it is. You might want to try and you want to try and jazz that up a bit, you know? Yeah, time. What's the nature of time? Is time empirical or is time, like Kant says, something the mind does? Yeah, but remember what you're trying to do, Chloe, is convince the reader. So you want to try and convince me which one, theory A or theory B, is correct. Um, Personal identity, like who are you? Are you a self? What is a self? Are you just a collection of memories? Uh, what is the nature of the self, right? And by the way, take a look, do what I'm doing now. Take a look through the rest of the book, look at topics that draw your interest, and start reading about them now, right? Free will. Do we have it? Do we live in a deterministic universe? Are we determined? Or can we still be free in a deterministic universe? Do we need free will for moral responsibility? Right? And the biggest questions of all are in the last chapter. These are arguments for and against the existence of God. And you can evaluate these arguments, critique them, maybe try and come up with your own. Yeah, free will. I wouldn't say versus fate. Fate has religious connotations, kind of supernatural connotations. It's free will versus determinism. Um, yeah, you could, Cormac. Like are large language models as a type of machine, are they really thinking machines? And you could argue yes or no. Yeah, Kaya is consciousness separate from the body. Yep. Yeah, you could do that. Like you could inquire about the nature of space or time or both. And state whether you think that these things are objectively real. So again, like we're talking realism and idealism. But whatever you do, like start reading ahead now, and ask questions that are related to the the sections in the book. So yeah, I would take a broad, simplistic approach. Go for low-hanging fruit, right? Try and pick low-hanging fruit. So, does God exist? Do we have free will? What kind of thing is the mind? Can a computer think? Does my perception reveal the world the way it really is, or merely a representation of it? You mean like defending a fallibilist position, or I mean, I suppose you could talk about epistemology. You could some of the stuff we've talked about already, like foundationalism versus coherence theory, or reliabilism, um, fallibilism. Um, are any of these positions superior or inferior to another? Um, yeah, it's fine. Those would all make really good topics, and you've thought about them the most, right? Because we've already covered them. I just happen to think the more fun questions occur later in the textbook. Yeah, Ben, exactly. That would make a great topic. If you're thinking of doing that for a topic, go ahead and read the chapter on free will. Like, read it. Don't wait for me to lecture on it. There won't be enough time. Read it now. And maybe, I mean, the lectures I did for this class last year are still on YouTube. So, say you read the textbook chapter on your topic, free will, for example, then you can go and watch the lecture I did last year on it. Get some ideas that way. Yeah, is time a social construct or is it a natural phenomenon? I would emphasize natural phenomenon. Or is it a mental sort of form of sensible intuition, like Kant argued, right? Oh yeah, the allegory of the cave. Yeah, that would be great. The allegory of the cave would be a really nice touchstone. You can also, by the way, mentioning that, you can also relate some of the things that we're learning about to popular media. Do a sort of a philosophical exegesis of popular media. So you might do, I don't know, a philosophical analysis of The Matrix, the 1999 film The Matrix, directed by the Wachowskis, which is one of my favorite films. Although it's a bad time. It's a bad time for your favorite movie to be The Matrix. Because The Matrix has been appropriated by, those stupid uh people on the internet, the conspiracy theorists, the Andrew Tate people, oh, it's the Matrix. Duh. It's the Matrix, bruv. Oh, what a little. Oh. I better stop talking about Andrew Tate or I'm going to start cursing like a sailor. But, all of this escape the Matrix nonsense by these hyper masculine misogynist conspiracy theorist types. That really sucks because the Matrix is actually a very philosophical film, which can be viewed as basically the allegory of the cave, right? Neo's journey escaping the Matrix is the philosopher's journey. So you could, sort of explain, okay, so Neo's journey compared with Plato's cave. And you just frame it, in terms of, a thesis like, I don't know, the film The Matrix is is representative of the philosopher's journey. That is what I'm going to argue. And you can argue that um you could do this with the Truman Show as well. That's another film that's quite philosophical, along the same lines as The Matrix, right? Like how Truman is in this world and it's an artificial world and he's just part of this show that everyone watches, but he doesn't know that, right? So you can sort of exegese things from books, films, etc., as long as they pertain to the class. Yeah, Chloe, you could absolutely do something related to natural or feminist epistemology. Absolutely. Yeah, or like Angela says, like Black Mirror. Some Black Mirror is pretty good. I tend to think that the earlier episodes are more thoughtful. When it was on, I don't know what it was on. Was it the BBC or? Channel 4 or something. Those were the best ones. When it went to Netflix, I detected a drop in quality. Um, but yeah, no, yeah, it's The Matrix is a philosophical film. Um, mm-mm. Yeah, books are fine. Um, well, if you've got room, you should consider counter arguments. But be aware of the amount of space that you have. I mean, 12 to 15 hundred words is not really that much. You know, it's not very long. I think it's 5 or 6 pages maybe. So it's not really very much space. Um, so you might briefly consider a counter argument if necessary, but otherwise I would focus on just convincing the reader of the truth of your thesis or of the correctness of your answer to the research question you've chosen. Well, it depends. Like if you're doing an adjudicative paper, you might not need to include a counter argument because you're already adjudicating between two positions. But you'll have a little bit more space if you're just writing a positive or negative argument. So you might consider some counter arguments that way. It's not exactly confirmation bias if you don't. Confirmation bias is really just a cognitive bias where we selectively remember information that supports our worldview. But it really depends on the argument that you're presenting, the position that you're trying to convince the reader of. Yeah, yeah, basically, yeah, Leah. If you were to write about the Truman Show, it wouldn't just have to be the philosopher's journey. It could be authenticity, like you say. Um, a really good source for philosophical questions and okay, so if we do film, should yeah, probably not Mean Girls, but something philosophical. Yeah, Quinn, yeah, gender is a social construct. I mean, gender is a hot topic right now. So you could explore the ways in which it's a social construct. But just remember that you have to frame it in terms of an argument, right? It can't just be a survey. You can't just be like, gender's a social construct, blah, blah, blah. You have to actually argue something, right? Yeah, the Truman Show is good. I will say right off the bat that if you're looking to do something with fiction, philosophy and fiction, okay, I don't know if I know that one, Stalker, but sounds good. Yeah, no problem. Um, so science fiction is an excellent place to mine ideas for a philosophy paper. All science fiction, really, but especially Star Trek. So if you're a science fiction fan, uh, then you've got a lot of material to sort of work with as a touchstone for your paper. Of course, there are a lot of other, you know, philosophical works of media that are not science fiction that you could use. Um, but yeah, that's what I would recommend. I would read through the book, see what's interesting to you, try and come up with something, use the sketch I gave you at the beginning. Identify an area of interest, articulate a thesis or a research question, and then sketch out a plan of attack for your paper where you kind of sketch your argument and think about what sources you might like to use. and then start writing. And of course, if at any time you have any questions, contact me. We can set up a meeting and talk about your paper. Because often writing your first university paper can be a little tricky. You don't exactly know how to start. Excuse me, everyone. I have a very scratchy throat today. I think the air is very dry in here now that it's getting cooler. But we only have 5 minutes left, so are there any questions before I let you go? Okay, well, I suppose the one last bit of advice I have is don't be afraid to get creative. I think that it's very important to be creative. Creativity is a skill that can aid your writing. It can help you make your writing more interesting using creative examples and creative scenarios can help draw the reader in. Um, and it can help you generate really interesting topics for your paper too. So don't be afraid to get creative. I like to see that. I like to see you use not only your reason and your critical thinking, but your imagination. I really want to see that. Um, well, the list of topics is what we just came up with. Um, I don't really see the need to, well, I might write everything down, but probably not. Um, really, if you scroll through or scroll, if you flip through the textbook, watch this lecture, there are a lot of ideas. And also you can use, this is the one thing you can use ChatGPT for. You can ask it for like, I don't know, 5 possible topics for your philosophy paper, but that's it. As far as sharing a past paper, I don't really have the permission of any of my previous students to do that. So, um, I don't really have one handy that I can share. Um, yeah, there's not really, yeah, no, Jonathan, you're going to use whatever you need to use. Don't like limit yourself to like an argument formula, right? You can use whatever you want, Sully, but submit in docx, or PDF. Will they not be in text? What will not be in text? The the topics? I mean, when I say I want you to be creative and imaginative, I mean I want you to come up with a topic, right? Like I've given you some suggestions today, like do we have free will? Does God exist? Can computers think? What's the nature of like these are easy. You can just come up with these like this. But I want you to come up with an interesting topic, something that's interesting for you. Like show me that creativity, show me that imagination. Yeah, like I mean really, I mean I what else did we come up with? Let's try and summarize things real quick. There's um you could always do the old rationalism versus empiricism. Um, do we have free will? What is the nature of perception? Does God exist? Can computers think? Um, what is the nature of the self? Yeah, like have a look through the textbook. If something like, the nature of the mind strikes you as interesting, then go to that chapter and read it. Zero in on a topic like, ooh, dualism versus physicalism, right? What is the mind? Is it a separate thinking substance like a soul? Or is it just what the brain does, right? Read that chapter, start working on your little sketch of your paper, and then go from there. Well, that's really all I have. Be sure to email me if you have any questions. I will answer them as quickly as I can. And remember, take advantage of writing services. Don't rely on AI. Go in, talk to a human being. Um, that will help you build your essay writing skills um, much better than just relying on some computer will, right? Okay, so that's all I can think of. Hey, it's the Thanksgiving long weekend, isn't it? Coming up. Well, enjoy your long weekend. I hope you get the chance to relax just a little bit, and maybe you'll even get the chance to eat some turkey or something. Yeah, right. No rest for the wicked. Well, keep working if you need to. You know, if you're going home, safe travels. If you're staying here, get together with some friends, some classmates. You don't want to spend it alone. Get together with people, hang out, take some rest. And then after the weekend, if you've got any questions about this, send me an email. Let me know. All right. So thanks, everyone. And I'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye for now.